Hi there and welcome to another BJ safety video. Many pilots enjoy flying adventurously. For most, enjoying flying a new type or at a new site is adventure enough. In these cases there's always instruction available to prepare for your new flying experience. Some, however, enjoy more of a challenge. John Williams and Chris Gill are no strangers to flying adventure. In this video they discuss some of their methods and how they've expanded their experience safely. First off is John, interviewed by Phil King.
John is, I think, one of the greatest proponents of adventurous flying.
I'm not entirely sure that that's a compliment, but yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, adventurous flying, we do it because it's enormous fun. And the things we get to see and experience, just fantastic. Nothing is completely without risk. But the risks, if you manage them properly, are a lot less than some people might think.
So managing them properly is the key to it, I guess. So how do you manage them?
You know, it's something it's hard to think consciously about, but probably the most important thing is having options in everything that you do. If you're out thermal flying and you think, yeah, I'm going to go to that cloud next, and if that one doesn't work, I'm going to go to the one to the right of it. Oh no, wait a minute, looking at the one on the right, actually behind that is another one. And if that one doesn't work, then there's a ridge. And if the ridge doesn't work, then there's a field beyond that. So being permanently aware of the various options you've got in your future does a couple of things. One, it helps your speed. So if the first climb isn't very good, you may well think that the next option is better and it's already in your head and ready to go. But at exactly the same time, it makes you safer. Because if the first one doesn't work, you know what you're going to do next. And at the end of a chain of possible things you're going to try is a landable option.
Does the same apply when you're ridge soaring or wave soaring?
Pretty much. In ridge soaring in Scotland, I think, is different from some of the lower ridges used in the south of England, in that you've normally got a lot more time than you might imagine, because we're at higher heights. And while you might be close to the terrain on the top, there's always a valley you can run down. So I've often said to people, I don't mind being low in the mountains. What I really object to is being low in the flatlands, because there's no options left.
Sounds a bit like rock climbing in some ways, that you get secure foot and hand holds, and you don't move on until you've secured yourself.
That's a really interesting analogy, because if you read the rock climbing books or talk to people who do it, they'll often say that in every climb there's a crux, the one particular difficult point, that if you can get that bit right, everything else is easy. And I think probably every cross-country flight that I do, and I suspect every cross-country flight that anyone does, at some point there's a crux in there and an awkward bit. Maybe for the guy setting off in his first silver distance, the crux is getting below 3,000 feet and thinking, this is difficult. The key for me is, especially on a long flight, you cannot concentrate flat out for every moment of, say, a 12-hour flight. But if you can recognize the bits that are really important, in the same way as recognizing the bits that are really important in a competition flight, then you put every last ounce of your concentration into that, and it pays dividends inordinately. There are other times when you're high and relatively relaxed, and the terrain ahead looks good, where you can stop and think longer term about other strategic matters, but not at the same intensity as you need in those really critical bits. So a key skill is working out where the crux of the flight is and working really hard at that point. And it works on both safety and speed.
But if you go out over the sea, what then? I mean, obviously you haven't got land-out options immediately.
Well, I guess that's a classic example of we do not always fly over landable terrain.
Okay, yeah.
I guess the sea is landable, but you don't want to do it. And wave soaring shouldn't mean that sort of wave soaring. So it's all about being able to reach safe terrain. And the first time I turned North Sea 1, I said to myself, I'm not going to try to go out there below 8,000 feet. I was just about on 8,000 feet as I left the coast, which would have allowed me to lose a couple of thousand on the way out, a couple of thousand on the way back, and still had a sense of light over the coast. And as it happened, I found a weak line of lift on the way out and ended up higher at the turn point over water than yet. So the concept of trying it, that's almost a stepping stones thing as well. So you move out from the coast down a route, knowing the safe territory behind you. If you hit massive sink, you turn around, you go back. If you don't, it's okay to continue, but always being aware of the option that's behind you and the safe option. You're talking about things which are the psychology. So going out over water is an odd thing in your mind because it feels wrong. But the more you can think about what actually matters, which is being able to reach stuff. Mm-hmm. And that conversation with yourself on the psychological bits is really important. Chatting to Sant Cervantes the other day, and we've been talking about CRM, so the cockpit resource management, which is really understood to be critical in jets now, where you take advantage of the expertise and the knowledge of everyone in the cockpit. Mm-hmm. And Sant started to talk about single-seater CRM.
Single-seater CRM?
Single-seater CRM, which I think is a lovely expression. Mm-hmm. And it's the conversation I sometimes have with myself. And sometimes culminates with stop being stupid and put it in that field now. Okay. Which I will say out loud to myself.
Yeah.
So that if
self-briefing. So you've had your options and you've now acknowledged that you've come to that option, which is land in that field.
Exactly. Mm. And the more you think about this sort of psychological pressures that we put on ourselves. So I have a certain reputation for doing maybe noteworthy flights is a word to use. I have to remember that when I'm out there and it's not going very well, that I'm not doing something that I don't push on just to satisfy somebody else's expectation, or start to worry about what somebody will think if I wimp out and come home. Mm-hmm. There's an old Irish folk song, which was a lovely thing from Percy French, saying, one of the lines in it is, best be a coward for 5 minutes than a dead man all your life.
Do you think you're immune to...
No, but I've been lucky enough to scare myself by the right amount at the right time to reinforce some of the messages we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like a young driver. If you're lucky, you get scared before the accident, and then the accident doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. So lots of flying, lots of thinking, and lots of managing those options. Keeping something else up your sleeve.
Yeah. And how does, you've got an electric engine set behind you that you can pop up pretty quickly and get you out of trouble. How does that affect your flying?
It saves me a lot of beer and money in bribing tug pilots. So if I want to launch at 3 minutes to 4 in the morning, as I've done a few times, it's a great way of doing that. As a soaring thing, I think, to be honest, it's overrated, even though the electric side of it is really, really reliable, and that's a risk that you might take it for granted. On any decent soaring flight, you're not putting yourself in a position where you're going to need it. So the big advantage for me is to be able to get a launch when I want it.
So your options don't end up with using a motor as your last option?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
That will come to grief sometime or other. Even the most reliable thing, like electric engines, will fail from time to time.
Yeah. John, are there any red lines that you would never cross?
You mean, is there anything I wouldn't do?
Yeah.
For money or not, when I'm flying, particularly in wave, if it's one of those days where I think the cloud base may be touching the mountain tops, I stay very, very well clear of cloud.
Okay.
And the one thing I will not wish to do is find myself descending in cloud, perhaps safe and level, but the first thing I discover is a hard landing on a piece of granite somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
And that I think is the big one. Other than, as we've been talking all the way through, if you don't have an option, don't do it.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And
so you may find yourself doing what's perhaps an adventurous thing. You do it once, you calculate what's a decent margin for trying it. It works well, and you do it the next day, and you assume it's going to work the same way. Perhaps only after you've done it half a dozen times and discover that your estimate was grossly conservative. Don't start eroding those margins until you've got a real good sample of how this thing works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Minimising the danger.
Even if the really sought-after turn point in a record attempt is just over there, and the only thing that might work is a ridge to get there, but it isn't landable. If that ridge doesn't work, your stuff, don't do it.
Yeah.
You've got to have an option. If there are no options left, you're not in a good place.
Okay. Well, thank you, John. I think there's a lot to learn, and I think we're all still learning, but your experience will help other people.
Yes, nobody's too old not to be a bad example or a good example.
Some great tips there from John. Thanks very much. Now we move on to some insights from Chris Gill.
You know, whenever it's good, we're flying. You know, we get ridge lift, wave lift all year round, and thermal in the summer as well as convergence as well. So it's yeah, it's a super place to be up in North Wales. So, had to get that one in there.
Okay, well, on that note, let's play some video and let's see some of the stuff that you've been getting up to.
It's not a bad sport, really, is it?
Some of the flying that you're doing there looks really, well, you could say it's adventurous. Do you reckon that flying is more dangerous than, you know, just staying locally and flying locally?
Yeah, I think technically there is an added element of risk because you've got the risk of landing out. So, you know, as soon as you go away from the airfield, you've got that risk. But as long as you manage it and you've got somewhere to land, you've always got an escape option, and that's kind of what I try and have into my head and pass it on to the pupils that I'm flying with. If you've always got an escape plan, it's safe. It's the second you relax and you go, oh well, it's looking a bit dodgy. There's nowhere to land. You know, when you stop thinking ahead, that's when it gets dangerous. Yeah, so it's you know, always have an escape plan is the trick.
But you're flying a DG1001M. You've got an engine.
Yeah, we've got an engine, and it's nice to go and fly. And if you get it wrong, it's nice to be comforted by the fact that you might not have to land in the field that you're set up for, but you always, you know, have in your head that it's not going to work, and you just carry on and you land in the field. But if you don't have an engine, just be comfortable with landing out.
Obviously, you developed your flying here. You started off flying, you know, reasonably locally, I guess. So how do you develop it to? Because, you know, you're obviously out there amongst the mountains now. How do you know where the fields are? How do you know how to fly the certain ridges and all the rest of it? How have you kind of gone about figuring all that stuff out?
Yeah, some of it is, well, a lot of it is looking at the terrain before you go. You know, I spend quite a lot of time looking at one of the routes that I've been planning that we do quite regularly now, and looking at Google Earth, looking at sensible sized fields, looking at the terrain, looking at all the escape options and the heights of the ridges, and, you know, what heights you're likely to be soaring them, and, you know, always having, you know, options as you go. And some of them are out of sight, which is the daunting thing, but if you know where they are, it's just slowly, you know, start high, give yourself lots of time, lots of options, and you can just explore and know where those fields are, so that you always land, you know, you've always got an escape plan.
So how do you start high if you're on the ridges then?
Thermals.
Okay.
Thermals are good. Alternatively, you know, with the engine, you know, you can start when you launch over there, you can get there quite high.
So if somebody was to come, well, here or anywhere really, and want to do some of this adventurous flying in the hills and stuff, you would recommend that they kind of start off high in thermals and things like that?
Yeah, you know, you could fly with me or with someone else who knows the area, and we can talk about landing options and go, look, it's safe around this corner here, we've got fields here, here and here, and then you show them that. And I must say, before people fly with me, they go, oh, I wouldn't be doing this on my own, and you go, this field's here, here, and they go, actually, that's safer than what it looks. A lot of the videos, they might not seem safe when you're flying up against hills and stuff, and you can't see the escape options on the video, but actually there are, but they're just, you can't see them on the video.
Yeah,
and that's what gets a lot of people to think, oh, it's dangerous, but it's not. If you hop in, you can see that actually it's not. Yeah, it's perfectly fine.
So there's always escape options. There's always a valley that you can go down and find a field at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you actually, are there any kind of red lines that you don't cross when you fly?
Yeah. So again, people have got in their minds that you've got an engine, you can go anywhere, and it's like no, you treat it like a glider. So if you're low over unlandable terrain, that's really, really bad, even with an engine, because if the engine's going to go, it's going to go at that point, and it's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
So always treat it like a glider, and if the engine works to get away from the field, great. So.
Is there anything that you can do before you actually go, before you even fly? I'm thinking about, we're trying to promote, the idea of thinking ahead more. So you do your adventurous checks before you get airborne, and we're trying to expand that out to other things. So are there any other things that you might kind of have a think about on a particular day that you might plan for before you even get airborne?
Yeah, okay, so if we're going ridge soaring, for example, or if there's wave around, usually if the ridge is working, or ridges, wherever you are working, there's usually wave around. That can mess up the ridge lift. So if you've got in your mind that you're going to arrive quite low on a ridge expecting it to work, that's where it goes wrong.
Okay.
Because if the ridge can stop working for a whole number of reasons. So as long as you're prepared for that, and you're not just focused solely on it will work. It's not working. And so if you think ahead what you're going to do or where you're going to go if things don't go to plan, then you'll do a lot better.
But surely, if the wind's blowing on the ridge and the air's got to go over the ridge, does it not always work?
No, it doesn't.
Really?
Yeah, we found out the hard way once before, haven't we?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So yeah, it could be nearby showers messing up the wind. It could be down wave hitting the ridge. There could be all sorts of reasons, and you've just got to have in your mind, what you're going to do if it doesn't work. And as long as you're prepared for that before it happens, then things are a lot more comfortable. And it's when you relax and don't think ahead is when it becomes quite uncomfortable.
Yeah. So you're always thinking, okay, if this ridge doesn't work, then I've got this field, or I'm going to try that ridge, and then there's
of course it depends on your height, and you've got options. If that bit of the ridge doesn't work, what if I go around here, or if I do that?
Yeah.
But always have like a safety height in your head where you think, right, we need to commit to landing here, rather than wait until you're a couple hundred feet and go, oh, there's no fields.
What we could do is just show a little bit more video at this stage, and just some, maybe if we can find some of the decision making that you're doing when you're flying. Chris is thinking now.
I'm trying to think of. Once you commit to the other side of the lake, there's a couple of fields. They're not very good, to be honest. Or go back to Bala, which is behind us, where there are a couple of nice fields. As you can hear, the Vario's quite happy, so we're making good progress. The next bit, I can't remember what the hill's called, but the hill goes up to about 3,000 feet, and getting hooked onto the good stuff from low down is the tricky bit where I failed last time. So I might try a bit
obviously
harder.
This video is for not just people that come to Denby, but also fly at other places, or I guess you could say them adventurous places, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know, Talgarth, the Min, Zaboyne, Sutton Banks. Some of the lots of places in the country that have hills around and stuff. So is there a way that if I wanted to go and fly at some of those places, that you could prepare yourself before you even went?
I think most places now have got stuff on websites, so you can have a look at, you can pick up some local knowledge. For example, here I need to link, or one of the videos I show is how to get away off the ridge low down off a winch launch, and because that catches people out. So stuff like that, and other places will have the same, I'm sure. Another big one is if you're going off rather than local soaring to go do some fun stuff, is be really confident in your ability to stick it into a field and very good approach control, stuff like that. Because if you're not very good at that and you end up in a tight field, and your approach control is all over the place, things are going to go wrong quite quickly. Be in practice is what I'd say, and be confident in your ability to go and land out, because that's part of gliding.
And also for here, just being able to land accurately is pretty important as well, and lots of other places actually.
Yeah, so I think it's very, very similar at Aboyne, where because we're quite a tight airfield and a very narrow runway, and we ask people to land and roll all the way to the end of the runway, and it's a very narrow tarmac strip, and we ask people not to use the grass. And a lot of people struggle because we do get some really rough conditions, so getting it on the runway and keeping it on and keeping the wings level, that can be quite tricky for some people, as we see.
Okay. So again, just general accuracy.
Yeah.
Places like, I guess, Talgarth and places like that, you're going to have to land
again,
accurately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to go through the end of it.
Yeah, Talgarth's similar, but kind of the opposite. We ask people to land as long as they can here, but there's not much room, and you've got to have very good approach control, and again, land it in the quite small field that they've got.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, but it's, flying at these places might be challenging, but the challenges are worth it for the flying.
Big time. Yeah. It's incredibly rewarding flying, going to places like this, and Talgarth and wherever. Expand your horizons, if you like.
Yeah.
It's definitely worth it.
Okay. Well, I think we've just about covered most of the things that we want.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time.
No problems.
And, we'll hopefully see you in the air.